As you know, here at the Mad Wolf, it's our mission to educate you on finances. In today's video, we'll be talking about a step-by-step guide on how you can buy your very first house. Just a quick recap in case you missed the last video, we discussed how you can invest $10,000 in 2020 and the different ways you can go about it. With that aside, let's go over the process and steps on how you can buy your very first house on your terms, because this will be the single largest investment you will make in your life. It's also important to note that this will be the best return on your money in the long run, which equates to growing your wealth. This is considered one of the largest investments for a few reasons. One being that real estate moves in cycles, meaning that sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down, but consistently over the decades, real estate has appreciated. A second reason is that buying a home builds equity. Instead of throwing money away each month at rent, you're actually putting that money towards buying your home, which is considered an asset. A third reason is that for the first few years you start paying your mortgage, a majority of those payments go towards your interest. You can actually deduct a percentage of your interest from your taxes, which lowers your taxes altogether at the end of the year. So it's important to know that buying your first home is going to be an extensive process that will require both your time and money. The processes that we'll be going over today will consist of 10 different topics, each with their own discussion points and how to approach buying your first home. So for number one, let's start with what's going to be the most important and deciding factors when buying your first home, and that's going to be how much you're going to need as a down payment. This normally depends on the type of loan you get, and depending on that loan, it will require either more or less money needed for that down payment. When it comes to getting a loan in real estate, most people have two options. One is going to be a conventional loan, and the second is going to be an FHA loan. A conventional loan is by far the most common type of loan to get for real estate, as it makes up 72% of all home purchases. Now, a conventional loan is just a loan that's not backed by the government. Instead, it's loaned from private lenders and or banks. This means that for a conventional loan, you'll have to come up with somewhere between 10 and 15% as a down payment if you plan to live on the property. However, on the other hand, an FHA loan is a government-sponsored loan. This means that they typically have lower credit qualifications, lower payment qualifications, and normally it's a lot easier to get than a conventional loan. And typically, you can put down as little as 3.5%, which for a $400,000 house would equate to $14,000 as a down payment. On the flip side to such a small down payment, banks will be charging high interest rates. There are limits to FHA loans because the government does not want people going out and buying $3 million houses just because they have $150,000 available to them. But at the end of the day, it's going to be up to you to decide which option works best for you. So, now that we've discussed how much money you'll need as a down payment, the next step is going to be building your credit. Now, this is absolutely essential when buying your first home, because just like you'll need a down payment, you'll need good credit. And as we've discussed in the past, your credit score shows how likely you are to repay any money that's been lent to you. Ideally, you'll want a credit score somewhere in the 700s, because that's typically where banks will offer the lowest interest rates possible to you. In terms of how to build your credit, I've discussed this a few videos ago, and I'll just make sure to link that in the description down below so I don't have to waste your time right now. Okay, so now for step number 3, we're going to be talking about getting pre-qualified. This means that you're going to discuss and talk to a lender before you do anything else. And by speaking to a lender, you'll know exactly what you can go out and purchase without wasting anyone's time, especially your own. The last thing you want happening is that you're going out looking at properties, you find the perfect place, it's amazing, you want it, and then you find out that you can't actually finance it and get a mortgage for it. My suggestion would be that you don't start looking at properties until you go discuss with the lender roughly what you're able to afford. There's no sense in creating heartbreak. Secondly, by going and talking to a lender beforehand, and then you find that perfect place, now you have everything set up in the background to make for a smoother process. And more often than not, if you found that perfect place, chances are other people have found it too, but since you've already been pre-qualified, you might have that small advantage over those other people. And anytime you found a good deal, timeliness really matters because generally speaking, the quicker you can move on that deal, the better it's going to be for you. Just so you're prepared, here are a few items that a lender will be wanting from you. 1 to 2 years of your tax returns, 6 to 12 months of your bank statements, a full credit report, pay stubs, and a list of any assets or liabilities that might be tied to. And as a side note, if you're self-employed, they're going to be looking at you a lot closer than if you weren't. Moving along to step number 4, this is the fun part, we're going to be talking about your home/search criteria. It's best in these situations that you start off by creating a list of exactly what you want in a home. These are the things that you cannot change that will be an absolute deal breaker for you. For example, what location do you need to be in? How many bedrooms do you need to have? How many bathrooms do you need to have? Do you want a yard? These are all things that need to be thoroughly thought about. From here, it's important to think about the things that you would like to have. For example, would you like a pool? Would you like a theater? Would you like a game room? Or maybe you would like a nice view. This is all going to help when you start the process of searching for properties. Otherwise, you might just get overwhelmed. After you're satisfied with your lists, now comes the fun part. You can now go ahead and start searching on your favorite real estate websites. And just to name a few, there's Zillow, there's Trulia, Realtor, and Redfin. There's a ton out there. Pick whichever one you'd like to use. The nice thing about these websites is that they're a massive MLS portal. This means that you can enter in all the nitty-gritty items from your list that you made before, which is going to be super convenient for you. For number 5, should you get a real estate agent to help you buy? Here's how this works. With pretty much every house that's listed for sale, the seller is obligated to pay a 5 to 8% commission based on what state you live in. The 5% gets split between the agent representing the buyer and the agent representing the seller. The biggest issue when dealing with realtors is that they will always BS you. Realtors are often referred to as glorified housewives. This phrase comes from the lack of assistance when you need it. For example, you request the homeowner's expenses for the last 3 years. They simply just don't want to do the work. In today's modern age of technology, we are lucky enough to be able to access pretty much all the information we need in order to do our own due diligence without the help of a realtor. More often than not, they'll try to make you think that they're the authority when they're not. Clearly the seller is the authority, but these are the type of games that they're going to be playing with you. For number 6, during the search process, an important item often gets breezed over by people, and that is the topic of comps. Comps stand for comparables and relate to the homes that you're looking at. It's very important as a buyer that you're comparing house prices just like a private eye does their detective work. The first thing that you'll want to compare is apples to apples across the board. For this process to work, you'll be having to compare houses similar to the ones you're looking at in location, size, square footage, amenities, etc. Some of the factors when performing your comp search consist of bedrooms, bathrooms, square foot, year built, style, and structure. The second thing you'll want to compare is what has sold. This means that you need to find comps similar to the ones you're interested in and see what they've previously sold for. Pretty much on every real estate website, there'll be a small little checkbox that you can click that'll then show you properties that have only been sold. This will help you decide what a fair asking price is compared to the listing price. The last thing I would say is it's important to know the local market. This means that you'll be looking into days on market, interest rates, and the local inventory of houses available. And days on market just means how long that property has been up for sale. And interest rates meaning paying attention to periods of low and high interest rates. Moving swiftly along to number 7, let's say that you've looked at a half a dozen houses and you've been able to narrow it down to the one. This is where the negotiation process begins. So here are a few items that you should always negotiate when purchasing a home, no matter what. The first item is all or some of the closing costs to be paid. If you're in a buyer's market and the seller's really anxious to sell, you might be able to get them to pay for some or all of those closing costs. The second item is flexibility on closing or possession dates. Once you land on a closing date, you're probably thinking to yourself, how soon can I move in? This all depends on your situation, of course. You might be waiting for another property to sell, you might be looking to hire movers, or you might be transitioning from an apartment to your first house. Most buyers assume that it's their problem to figure out, but negotiating flexibility and position dates is actually a pretty common standard. The last and most important item to negotiate is the house price. Negotiating down the listed price is typically something that happens all the time. You can always ask for a lower price based on factors like comps, which you've already done, appraisals, house condition, and the overall housing market. The point is, don't be discouraged to offer something lower than the listed price. After all, something is only worth what someone is willing to pay. Now that we've come to number 8, we can discuss the PSA. A PSA is a purchase and sale agreement and will always be prevalent when purchasing real estate. Pretty much every seller will have a PSA, but it's going to be based on an MLS form. And unfortunately, these PSAs don't really protect the buyer, which is you. My suggestion would be to get an attorney to revise and or create a PSA so that you, the buyer, are more protected in case an issue arises. After all, we do want you to get that home of your dreams, and by hiring that attorney, he's going to make sure that no issues come your way. Now for number 9, we're going to be talking about the most time-consuming aspect of buying your house, and that is the period of due diligence. Due diligence means taking caution, performing calculations, going over documents, making sure that you have all the information possible on that property before you submit an offer. It essentially means doing your homework before you purchase the house. For this process, it is highly advised that you hire a real estate attorney to conduct most of this work, as a lot of it is going to be relating to legal. Your attorney will be checking Homeland Security, performing title work, deed history, checking betterments, checking environmental laws that correspond with the property, and making sure that there hasn't been any funny money involved. Next, you'll need an appraisal ordered by the bank or lender to check the value of the property. This helps them to determine your loan amount and confirms a fair asking price for you. As a side note, the highest standard for an appraisal is done by a Fannie Mae certified appraiser. If the bank does not offer this, I would go look for another lender. Either before or after, it's up to you, you will need an inspection. You'll have to hire an engineering company to perform the several inspections. Next are disclosures. This is when the seller gives to the buyer something that documents their acknowledgement of the property. For example, there might be leaks, there might be a lawsuit, or there might be a sewer line mishap. Disclosure laws are meant to protect both sides of the home purchase transaction. It's very important that all items be disclosed about major components of the house, such as water supply, sewer, or structural foundation issues. Lastly, you'll need title insurance. There's no exceptions here because without it, you're not going to be able to get a mortgage loan. We've made it to number 10, and that means the last item of this tutorial is doing the final walkthrough. These are the standards that the buyer, you, set before taking control physically of the house. The most important term here is called broom swept. It's how the condition of the property should be after it's vacated. Examples would be no personal items left behind, the floors have been cleaned and swept, furniture will either stay or go, depending on what you've already discussed. You should perform or have someone come out to complete a quick systems check before you take physical control of that house. And finally, before taking control of the house, make sure that the keys are transferred correctly and no duplicates have been made. So there you have it. That is the tutorial and step-by-step guide on how you can buy your very first house. Again, I ask if you found any of this information helpful, please hit that like button down below because it really helps out the channel and allows us to reach out to a larger audience. With all that being said, thank you all for watching and tuning in, and if you haven't already, please make sure to smash that subscribe button down below and I'll make sure to see all you finance nerds on the next one.